Question is, what is the relationship between the brain and experience? And this is a question that remains unanswered. When you experience love, for example, sure, you see that this chemical is released into the body, or that this area of the brain is stimulated. Did the body cause your experience of love? Or did your experience of love cause the chemical processes or the biological processes? Which comes first? Question is not fully answered. Why does neither exhibit the characteristics of the other? So you wouldn't say by any experiential means that love is the release of chemicals in the brain. You might say it's caused by the release of chemicals, but it's not the same thing, right? It is this, your experience and how you would articulate the experience has nothing to do with how you describe the chemical process or the biological process. Like if you were to explain all of your experiences to an alien who had no knowledge of human experience, you would hardly express it in terms of cognitive psychology or brain processes, to be more specific. You would hardly, even the sensation of eating an orange can hardly grasp, right? Something so simple, it's like acid, and then you give the alien some vinegar. And you say it's sweet, and you give the alien some sugar. Still, even though you're giving those experiences, unless you experience the thing in itself, forget about it being expressed through brain processes, monitors and chemicals and neurons and waves. You can't even express an experience via other experiences. You must express experiences through the experiences themselves. And so we're getting at the problem now of contemplation and meditation. You see, there's this gap between scientific processes, which I think the latest cognitive psychology has come to, and the actual experience itself. Since mental processes are radically unlike any other emergent properties that arise in the physical world, there seems to be little justification for regarding them as emergent properties of any physical entity. Mental processes have not been proven to be the same as their neural bases. Okay, so you have an issue here in their insistence on understanding the human mind as a purely natural entity. Scientists have treated it as if it must be physical, even though it displays no physical attributes and can't be detected with any physical instrument. So on one hand, okay, you can't measure it, and so do away with it was the solution. And then the solution was, well, you can't really measure it in its true form as an internal process of the mind, as a mental process, as a mental experience, and so measure it physically, the opposite solution. This is a central problem for the entire scientific study of the mind, and it has yet to be resolved. You see the issue? You can't measure that which is internal, that which is contemplative, meditative, a mental experience, a mental sensation. So it's not real. Don't measure it at all. Put it to the side. Leave it for philosophy and religion on one end. And then this realization, well, no, it is a real aspect of human existence. So how do we study it scientifically? Well, measure it with whatever means you can measure it by. And Wallace here says, well, psychologists have had some progress. Neuroscientists have had some progress. He's not saying it's entirely a pointless pursuit. But psychologists now study the effects of mental processes. So not the mental processes themselves, just the effects of them. Neuroscientists, on the other hand, study the correlates of mental processes. So you have a mental process, you have a mental sensation, an experience, and you can see it correlates to stimulation of this part of the brain. It correlates to the release of this chemical. But you can't tell. They're both, sometimes they're causes, sometimes they're effects. You can't tell which, and all you can tell is that there's this correlation. And it still tells you nothing about the mental experience itself. Experimental physicists are professionally trained to observe physical processes. Biologists are professionally trained to observe biological processes. Cognitive scientists have taken on the challenge of understanding mental processes, but unlike all other natural scientists, they receive no professional training in observing the realities that comprise their field of inquiry. So what he's saying is cognitive scientists ought to be trained in mental processes, meditation, contemplation. They should have knowledge of their practice. They should have knowledge of what meditation and contemplation do, what they're used for, what they feel like, in order to accurately study or move their field along.